Joe Biden predicted a long, hard winter in the final presidential debate a couple of weeks ago. We presume he was talking about the possible coronavirus pandemic extension and not what's looking like a tough legal fight shaping up over the results of the presidential election. So let's debate these cases and what's going on with Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov, recount lawyer from the Bush-Cheney 2000 legal team, Alex Vogel, and senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Hans von Spakovsky. Thank you all for being with us tonight or this morning, wherever you may be.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so Lawrence Tribe tweets this. It's now clear that no monkey business will rescue Donald Trump from a decisive electoral defeat. Guys like me can stop worrying about another Bush v. Gore. Oh, the Trumpsters will sue and scream and make stuff up, but they'll fail. I can finally get a good night's sleep. Alex.
Well, I think it's a little early for any of that. First of all, at this point in the process, the votes are going to be counted. Then the campaigns will decide whether or not they're within recount margins, or they can go to court if they see problems with the administration of the election. But to get from there to the Supreme Court is a long way away. So I'm not quite convinced we're heading to Bush v. Gore territory. It's certainly reasonable for the campaigns to look at how things are going, and certainly they're within their rights to request recounts if they're within the margins allowed by the state.
Hans, you and I talked about this earlier today on my podcast, Living the Bream, that's out there. If people want a more extended 20-minute conversation about this, we were really able to get into some of the minutia. But here is something that Bill Stepien, who is the Trump 2020 campaign manager, had to say today.
We are declaring a victory in Pennsylvania. This is not based on gut or feel. This is based on math. We feel very, very positive that the president and vice president will again deliver a victory in Pennsylvania. In fact, we have a high degree of certainty that the margin won't be close.
Hans, he's getting a lot of criticism over that. And you and I have talked about how Pennsylvania may be the thing that really ends up back at the Supreme Court. What do you make of where we are?
Right. Well, the problem in Pennsylvania was that you had the state Supreme Court change the laws set by the legislature with regard to absentee ballots. They extended the deadline. They made other changes, such as telling election officials they couldn't reject absentee ballots based on a signature comparison. Look, if the state legislature wanted to make a change like that, they could do that. They've got the constitutional authority to set those rules. But the state courts do not, and that's why this may end up before the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, if they actually follow the Constitution, is going to say, I think, that the state courts cannot make those kind of changes, basically overriding the state legislature and certainly not doing it so close to or in the middle of the election process.
And from one of the opinions or statements that we had that came from Justice Alito, joined by Justices Gorsuch and Thomas, he seemed to say as much that this is about state legislatures and the Constitution gives them the power to make the decision. So if this case indeed does end up before the Supreme Court, there'll be three to watch very closely there, see who else may join them or not. Okay, Politico says this: Biden looks screwed even if he wins. Biden lost ground with black voters and Latinos, though he gained some ground with white voters. He needed a crushing rejection of Trump to strengthen his case. He also needed the Senate. Jessica, he didn't get any of those things.
Well, we don't know how big the crushing of Donald Trump will be if Joe Biden does go on to win. Certainly if he wins Arizona and Georgia.
It's not going to be something like a wipeout, though.
Well, no, it's not going to be 400 electoral votes, but in these highly partisan times where we know that people are really going to their corners and we had so few undecideds, you would certainly have to say that if he wins Georgia for the first time in, I think, 28 years and picks up Arizona, which has been a holy grail state for Democrats that have been working on chipping away at that for another 20 plus years, that's a huge achievement for Joe Biden, as well as putting back together the blue wall. Now, in terms of the down ballot races, I'm personally disappointed. I thought we would have a few more Senate pickups and the House, that we would get those extra 10 to 15 seats, not losing people like Colin Peterson and Kendra Horn in Oklahoma. I think Nancy Pelosi and her team with Cheri Bustos going to have a lot of soul searching and work to do there. But I don't think we should be diminishing at this point. Well, first of all, we don't know the outcome, but the level of achievement that Joe Biden has pulled off at this particular moment in time with a force like Donald Trump on the other side.
Well, a lot of people would argue with the mainstream media and the pollsters giving a heavy assist to the Biden campaign. Both campaigns tonight maintaining that they have a path to victory. And we're waiting. Again, we expect in the next 45 minutes or so we'll get another vote tranche from Arizona. We'll see how that impacts things. But people very angry about the polls again this time around. The Atlantic says this: the polling is a catastrophe for American democracy. It's the failure of the polls that leaves Americans with no reliable way to understand what we as a people think outside of elections, which in turn threatens our ability to make choices or to cohere as a nation. Alex, there were a number of, whether you're talking about the national overall popular vote, whether you're talking about individual state races we told will be nail biters and their blowouts, these Senate races, and a number of the states that were absolutely off by 8 to 10 points. What do you make of where we are with polling? Because a lot of people are saying it's basically dead here in the United States.
It is dead, and this election has proved it. It's awful what happened. It's shocking given how much ink and airtime was devoted to pollsters explaining how they've solved it and why their results were accurate, and even more disturbing, mocking some of those pollsters who ultimately look like they called these races correctly. It is a problem not just in terms of people's expectation, it's because it absolutely changes voting behavior. If voters hear over and over again for weeks and weeks that their candidate is either going to win by 15 or lose by 15, it changes whether some of those folks will go to the polls or not. And that's a problem. It's a problem for the media organizations who rely on some of these polls, and it's certainly a problem for the people producing them. It definitely needs to be addressed before we go through this process again, because it is clear they have not figured it out.
Right, Hans, a very quick final comment from you about this idea that it's only Republicans who are dragging this thing into the courts. You and I know, and we talked about a number of cases that have been brought by parties on both sides of the aisle in recent weeks.
Well, particularly prior to the election, almost all the cases have been brought by Democrats and their allies. And what those lawsuits all involved was trying to change the rules regarding absentee ballots, trying to void out signature comparisons, trying to void out witness signature requirements, trying to extend the deadlines for absentee ballots. And those suits were filed in almost every state all around the country.
All right, Hans, Alex, Jessica, thank you all for your time tonight.